Hello there, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. Another week, another sonnet. I know you've been looking forward to it all week, waiting patiently for the release of Sonnet 48, which I imagine is someone's favourite sonnet. Someone out there thinks that Sonnet 48 is the best bit of writing to ever grace the earth. And if that's you, then interesting choice. I've just had a look through Sonnet 48 and it's fine. I think it's okay. And if you think it's the best sonnet there is, then you know what, who am I to say otherwise? And for those of you that have never read or even heard of Sonnet 48, then you're in for a hell of a ride. Without further ado, is that phrase, without further ado, a Shakespearean phrase? Good question. You know what, I'm just going to Google that right now. Just 1 second. The phrase has its roots in medieval English, derived from the old French word donc, meaning then or at that time. And then over time it's transformed into without ado. I guess I thought it was Shakespeare because of much ado about nothing, and I thought, well, you know, maybe he invented that without further ado. But apparently he didn't, so forget it. But you did learn something there, didn't you, probably? I bet you didn't know the origins of without further ado. Anyway, I should probably stop procrastinating and get on with it. Hold on, is procrastinating, is that a Shakespeare? No, I'm joking. Right, let's get on with Sonnet 48. How careful was I when I took my way, each trifle under truest bars to thrust, that to my use it might unused stay from hands of falsehood in sure wards of trust. But thou, to whom my jewels trifles are, most worthy comfort, now my greatest grief, thou best of dearest, and mine only care, art left the prey of every vulgar thief. Thee have I not locked up in any chest, save where thou art, though I feel thou art within the gentle closure of my breast, from whence at pleasure thou mayst come and part, and even thence thou wilt be stol'n, I fear. For truth proves thievish for a prize so dear. You know what? This is one of those sonnets where actually on the page I thought, not sure about this one. But reading it out loud is quite nice to do, in fact. You might have noticed in the tone of my voice I was having fun. I was enjoying myself out there on the stage reading Sonnet 48. And I can't say that for every sonnet that I've read on this bloody podcast. Some of them have been really hard to read and a real slog. And you've probably noticed that when I've been reading them. But this one sort of tripped off the tongue, which was nice. It was a delight to read. But now we should probably get into the weeds of this sonnet and work out what the hell Shakespeare was actually talking about in it. Because you were probably listening to that going, all right, but what's he going on about? Well, let's find out. So we start with, how careful was I when I took my way, each trifle under truest bars to thrust, that to my use it might unused stay from hands of falsehood in sure wards of trust. Now that's quite a big first chunk to take, but it's all one thought, I think. And here he's saying that he used to be really careful when he'd travel to secure all his possessions with a really good lock, truest bars, so that they didn't get stolen by criminals. And so criminals would be hands of falsehood, which is a nice way to describe a criminal. I think that's very, very poetic. I might start using that in modern day. You know, if I was in a supermarket, I might say, keep those ham sandwiches away from hands of falsehood. Keep them away from hands of falsehood, because they're hot property. Everyone wants a ham sandwich. Something like that. So to just recap that first section, he's saying, I used to be so careful when I travelled to keep all of my possessions under truest bars, which is, I think, good locks, so that thieves didn't come and steal my stuff. But thou, to whom my jewels trifles are, most worthy comfort, now my greatest grief, thou best of dearest and mine only care, art left the prey of every vulgar thief. So now he's bringing in the recipient of the poem, aka his lover, and he's saying, but you, who are way more precious than any jewels, compared to you, jewels are trifles. They're nothing, they're worthless. And you, who is my greatest comfort, my greatest comfort in the world, have actually become a big worry to me because you are open and vulnerable to vulgar thieves. So you're actually way better than all of my jewels and everything, but you're quite susceptible to being taken away from me. Thee have I not locked up in any chest, save where thou art not, though I feel thou art within the gentle closure of my breast. So I haven't locked you up in any chest, apart from my own chest, my actual chest, my chest which holds my heart. And you're not really there, even though I feel that you are. Is he being literal there? Shakespeare saying, well, obviously you're not actually in my chest. That would be crazy. You can't have a man in your chest. You see, these are the things that really confuse me about Shakespeare, because sometimes he can be really complicated with his language, and you sort of have to desperately try and catch up and get on his wavelength. And other times he's saying stuff like this, you're in my chest, but not literally. He has to say, but not literally, as if we're absolute idiots. Most of us, most human beings know that a human can't literally be in another human's chest, I would have thought. If you did think that was possible, then please get in touch. I'd love to have a chat. So, within the gentle closure of my breast, from whence at pleasure thou mayst come and part. So you can come and go as you will from my chest. And I think chest here is another word for heart, really. And maybe if I were to give some critical feedback to Shakespeare, maybe if I went back in time and I could give him some advice, I'd say maybe use heart instead of chest. It's a bit clearer. Just something to think about. And now we're on to the final couplet. And even thence thou wilt be stol'n, I fear, for truth proves thievish for a prize so dear. Ooh yeah, that's a nice final couplet, isn't it? A nice little rhyme going on there. But here he's saying, I'm worried that you'll be stolen from my heart, or my chest. Because even, even an honest, truthful man would turn into a thief if the prize, aka you, is so bloody amazing. And that is Sonnet 48. And I think the main arc of this is sort of Shakespeare saying that he should be more possessive of his lover, of the recipient of the poems. He seems to be saying, I haven't clung on to you hard enough, and if I'm not careful, you're going to be snapped up by another lover. Now, he doesn't have a solution for what he can do in this predicament, but he's definitely saying you can come and go from my heart, and that really worries me, because we know that in previous sonnets Shakespeare's lover has gone off with other people, and that has caused Shakespeare a lot of distress, really. At this point you begin to wonder, is it more hassle than it's worth, Shakespeare? This lover, and I know you're in love with him, but he seems like a bit of a nightmare. He's going off with everyone, and if you're really concerned about your lover cheating on you all the time, maybe you should not be in that relationship. There, I said it. Someone had to say it. And if I could go back in time right now to Shakespeare, I'd sit him down, make him a little cup of tea, and I'd say, look, man, I don't think this relationship is worth it. I think it's toxic, and you can do much better. I just hope Shakespeare had friends around him at that time that could say that to him. Anyway, I think it's about time to put this sonnet to our story. Now, if you'll remember, last week, Shakespeare is still in his little holiday home, and he still doesn't have a way of getting back into London because his horse, Couplet, has gone missing, leaving Shakespeare on his own, well, with Mercutio, of course, his cat, with hardly any supplies, hardly any food and water. And because of the state he's in, Shakespeare started to hallucinate that his lover, or who he thinks is his lover, John Donne, is with him, and that he's having sex with him and stuff. But he doesn't realise that it's just an apparition. It's all very sad, really. So he's just read Sonnet 47, which is all about his heart and his eyes being at war with each other and then making up to an apparition of who he thinks is his lover, John Donne. A very, very upsetting turn of events. Let's find out what happens next, shall we? Shakespeare finished reading Sonnet 47 to the apparition of John Donne. Well, John, what do you think? Do you get it about my eyes and heart sort of fighting over you and stuff? John Donne, of course, doesn't reply because he's an apparition. And Shakespeare says, well, maybe we could go for a walk. Still no response from John Donne's apparition. Shakespeare squints, and slowly John Donne starts to disappear. And Shakespeare said, No, John, don't go. Please, John. John. And just like that, Shakespeare was left alone in the holiday cottage again. A little tear rolled down his cheek. But just at that moment, he heard hooves outside, clippity-clopping around on the cobbled path that led to the house. Shakespeare frantically looked out the window, and he saw, it was Couplet's back. He ran outside as quickly as he could, and he and Couplet embraced. Not the kissing kind of embrace, just a hug. And then Shakespeare said, where have you been? And Couplet, of course, didn't reply because Couplet's a horse. But Couplet looked Shakespeare in the eye, and suddenly Shakespeare understood where Couplet had been. And he said, wow, you found love, Couplet. I'm so happy for you. And they high-fived, hoof on hand. Shakespeare said, anyway, you need to get me out of here. I need to go back to London to see John Donne. He was just round here, but then he disappeared. It was really weird. Couplet nodded, as if to say, of course I'll take you back to London, mate. No worries. And Shakespeare called to Mercutio, who was sleeping after another long trip to London, and they all galloped back to the city. On his way back, Shakespeare explained to Couplet and Mercutio that he was worried John Donne would go and sleep with other people again, and that he needs to make sure that John Donne won't go off and sleep with other people. So he's got an idea. It was a bit weird, the sight of this man with a little goatee and gold-hooped earring talking to his horse and cat. But, to be quite honest, not as weird as some of the plays he'd written. As they arrived back to London, Shakespeare ran into his house and picked up a trunk. He dragged it down the stairs and popped it on Couplet's back. Couplet neighed, as if to say, bloody hell, Shakespeare, this is really heavy. And Shakespeare said, "Come on, we need to go to John Donne's." And so they galloped off again and eventually arrived at John Donne's house. Shakespeare dragged the trunk up to the front door and knocked on the door. Some time passed, but eventually John Donne opened up and he went, "Oh, Shakespeare. Hello. Long time no see, how's it going?" And Shakespeare said, "Get in the trunk." And John Donne said, "No, what are you talking about? I'm not going to get in the trunk." And Shakespeare said, "Get in the bloody trunk." And he grabbed John Donne and shoved him in the trunk and locked it up. There was a big scuffle from within, and John Donne was shrieking at the top of his voice, "Let me out, Shakespeare." And Shakespeare said, "I must keep you safe. I must keep you as mine. You'll understand." And John Donne says, "I don't understand. I don't." "I'll explain when we get home." So, Mercutio, Couplet, Shakespeare, and John Donne in a trunk galloped off back to Shakespeare's house. Shakespeare dragged John Donne through the front door and popped him in the living room. John Donne's muffled voice cut through the air, saying, "Well, what is going on, Shakespeare? What is this all about?" And Shakespeare said, "Well, look, I was worried about you, going off and sleeping with other people, so I thought I'd pop you in my trunk. And actually, I've written a sonnet to sort of explain my concerns and my worries. So shall I read that?" And John Donne shouted, "No, don't read that. Just let me out." And Shakespeare said, "Sorry, I can't quite hear you. Did you say yes, definitely read it?" John Donne shouted, "No, I said no." And Shakespeare said, "Okay, I'll read it. I think you'll understand once I've read it." And so Shakespeare took Sonnet 48 from his back pocket and read. Sonnet 48. When I travelled, I used to be really careful to keep my possessions well locked up, so thieves couldn't get to them. But you, way more precious than my crappy old jewels, and my greatest comfort, have become my greatest sadness, because you have been left prey to any common thief. I haven't locked you up in a chest other than my own chest, and you're not really there, though I feel you are. You can come and go from my heart all you want, and I'm worried you'll be stolen from there, 'cause even an honest man would turn into a thief if the prize was this bloody good. Wow, this story is getting quite dark, isn't it? Shakespeare has locked up John Donne in his trunk. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking in the sonnet he says, "I haven't locked you up in a chest, like my possessions." But he didn't say anything about not locking him up in a trunk, did he? They are different. So, just in case you were going to write in and say, "Oh, your story's not accurate," well, it is, alright? And although I make this up off the top of my head, completely improvised, the story stands up to scrutiny. So don't try and pick holes in it. It is watertight. Anyway, probably time to end this podcast. I'll see you next week. Bye.